I suppose the story which is the most famous from that period is the story which related to the corruption around the Yorkshire architect John Poulsen. I went to Yorkshire, I think in the spring of 1970, and interviewed Ray Fitzwalter, who's now a big boss of Granada Television, but then was a young reporter on the Bradford Argus, who had written an article which had come to our attention at the Private Eye, been sent in to us, about the strange activities of this Wakefield architect. And we published an article over 3 pages in the Eye, probably the biggest article ever published in Private Eye up to that time. No one paid the slightest attention to these remarkable facts about the corruption that was going on. Apparently it was throughout the whole of the north of England, taking in representatives from both political parties, councils throughout the whole area, and so on. It just fell like a stone. And then his bankruptcy hearings were heard in public, and the fact that he'd given coffee pots to Labour Party ministers and bribed the Home Secretary of the time and all that sort of thing came out in public, and eventually Maudling, the Home Secretary, had to resign, and that was, generally speaking, put down to Private Eye.
Other notable scoops have included the collapse of Ronan Point, the Helen Smith affair, and the naming of Anthony Blunt as the 4th man. More recent investigations have included the Social Services pin-down scandal and the shooting of 3 IRA terrorists in Gibraltar.
Now, that was pretty well universally accepted by the media outside, with the honourable exception of Thames Television that went out and questioned it and got tremendously hammered as a result of questioning the shooting of people in this way, when they could quite easily, of course, have been arrested and tried since they were without arms and had no bombs in their car or anything of that kind. The great advantage of Private Eye's coverage of that story is that they're able to go on and on and on about the same subject. In other words, it's like piling fact upon fact, fortnight after fortnight.
The Guns of Gibraltar, starring Edward Fox as Colonel D, the man without a name, Anthony Hopkins as Major D, the other man without a name, Sean Connery as the whole of MI5, and Sir Alec Guinness as Coroner Paparazzi.
Right, man. War's a dirty business, but there are rules. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Good. You're only to shoot to kill. That's the one. Any questions? Major. Yes, I'd like to ask a question. What happens if there isn't a bomb in the car? Good question. And one the Sunday Times won't ask. Next? Coroner. What happens if someone, say a woman, sees the whole thing? Yes. One for MI5, that.
Well, we happen to know that the woman is just a common prostitute.
Good heavens, sir. How do you know that?
I've just made it up. It'll be in the Sun tomorrow.
John Sessions there as just about everybody. Another Eye journalist with a successful track record is Michael Gillard, whose City column has become required reading at, amongst others, the Bank of England and the City of London Fraud Squad. It's known for a level of accuracy not always shared by the more gossipy parts of the magazine. But when you're being fed what Derek Jamieson described as dangerous stories, there's a fair chance you'll make dangerous enemies. It was Gillard's City column, in part, which aroused the unparalleled anger of financier James Goldsmith. Richard Ingrams recalls.
James Goldsmith launched his amazing blitz on the Eye, and it came completely out of the blue. No one really had heard of him before that. And I was only interested in him because he'd suddenly emerged to take over the Slater-Walker empire, which had collapsed. And Goldsmith had before then come to my attention as a friend of Lord Lucan. And I thought it was very curious that this man should combine these two roles of A, murderer's friend, and B, saviour of this bankrupt city firm.
Goldsmith launched 63 libel writs not only at the Eye, but also at the newsagents who distributed the magazine. And he persuaded a judge to bring criminal libel charges against Ingrams, charges which carried a jail sentence. Almost immediately, he was knighted for services to the environment by Harold Wilson.
Unfortunately, small, subversive groups have been allowed to infiltrate all sorts of the activities of the nation, vital parts of the nation. Tolerance of extremists who are trying to destroy our society is not a virtue. I believe that it is cowardice and treason. That's where this nation, for so many years, has been fed pus.
In the end, Private Eye got off quite lightly, but Goldsmith didn't. His attempt to start a rival news magazine, Now, was destroyed by the Eye. Chrysler Cars had recently changed their name to Talbot in an effort to improve sales, so Sir James' creation was swiftly renamed Talbot magazine. Like Sir Alec Douglas Hume's premiership before it, it was laughed out of existence. Among the laughers, Spike Milligan, Pamela Stephenson, Peter Cook and John Wells.
Talbot, Britain's leading news magazine.
In this week's Talbot, the stories behind the news and the news behind the stories.
Only Talbot dares to print the stories that other papers throw away.
With her, the Nicaraguan cork industry, an exclusive interview with General Jose Pratwinkle, reading about it this week in the Talbot.
Exclusive Marplan poll shows 91% of Britain's teenagers have never heard of Talbot.
Having seen Goldsmith off, it was then quite gratifying for another hideous figure to emerge from the swamps. Even more hideous than Goldsmith, probably, in the shape of Robert Maxwell. It was memorable for the occasion on which Maxwell began to cry in the witness box, and nobody knew how to react to it. Some people thought it was funny, some people thought he was putting it on. And being sort of in the British court of law, they all sat in solemn silence while he fished out his handkerchief and mopped his eyes.
Crying, no doubt, for the future of the European, the next publication on Private Eye's hit list. But whether or not Maxwell's tears were crocodilian, the episode does beg questions about the Eye's ability to hurt people.
I used to accuse them all of being a bunch of Wickhamists who had never grown up. You know, they all tend to be from Winchester and public school. I mean, they dubbed me Sid Yobbo. That has caused me over the years immense damage. I mean, your station, Radio 4, they have no doubt whatsoever that Derek Jamieson is Sid Yobbo. Never mind that I left school at 14 and became editor of 4 national newspapers. So far as they're concerned, Sid Yobbo. It was Richard Ingrams who christened me Sid Yobbo, on the basis that since I came from the East End, I must be a yob, and certainly the fact that I left school at 14 proves that. And how could a yob be called Derek? Ridiculous. Who ever heard of Derek Yobbo? So, of course, it had to be Sid, didn't it? Now, that is elitist. That is sheer, pure snobbery.
Good morning. This is Sid Yobbo saying good morning from Radio Neasden. Blimey! Well, we've got a great show this morning with great music from the Spinners, the Drifters and the Neasden Radio Orchestra.
I think Jameson was one of those people who traded very successfully on being a working-class lad from the East End. He played up to this part of being the simple Cockney lad who'd made it to the top. And as he got more and more successful, so his accent became more and more coarse, and his origins became more and more humble. I always thought that he should get out of journalism and become a show business personality, which, in fact, what happened.
Another persistent target is the husband and wife team, Esther Rantzen and Desmond Wilcox.
They have a cartoon strip which frequently features my wife and myself, and others, Terry Wogan, Sue Lawley, and so on and so forth. At one stage, that cartoon strip devoted itself to the most anti-Semite, spiteful, horrid biography, I suppose, cartoon biography of Esther and her family. It told lies about my elderly and much respected father-in-law, who's now nearly 90, which deeply upset him and his wife. They picked their targets so badly.
In 1980, Wilcox resigned from the BBC after writing a book based on his TV series Explorers, which drew heavily on individual programme scripts written by other people. Private Eye accused him of plagiarism. Wilcox sued and won, the court deciding that his plagiarism had been guileless. Private Eye has often got its facts wrong, but there have also been cases where the magazine has felt hard done by. Aristotle Onassis won money for the suggestion that he might divorce his wife Jackie. Randolph Churchill received an apology for the allegation that his biography of his father Winston was sanitised, which it later turned out to be. And that notoriously right-wing commentator Paul Johnson won damages for the preposterous suggestion that he might in any way compromise his then firmly held socialist beliefs. But the Wilcox case still rankles more than any of these, and they won't let him forget it.
When they first started, journalists like myself thought it was an extremely good idea. Then it became a ventilation of the personal prejudices, for instance, of Richard Ingrams, who isn't terribly fond of many women, appears not to be fond of Jews, is certainly anti-women who are show business and upfront and, he would say, strident. So my wife became, on a number of counts, if not all of those counts, the target for the most astonishing inventions.
The anti-Semitism accusation is an old one, which dates originally to a number of articles written by Paul Foote attacking Israel's behaviour after the 1967 war.